Hello, Namaskar, and welcome to the CAA show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis, and my name is Juggi Bhasin. So, this lady, Nitasha Kaul, has been making news. She's been grabbing a lot of headlines, mostly of the notorious kind. And today I'm going to devote this entire episode on Nitasha Kaul and discuss with you that why is she panicking? That's right. Why is she panicking? I'll give you the context to this particular assertion which I am making. But first, let me give you a little bit of background about Nitasha Kaul because some of you, a lot of you would be aware, of course, of who Nitasha Kaul is by now because she has grabbed so many headlines in India, but some of you might not be knowing about her. So, very quickly, very briefly, Nitasha Kaul is actually a very well educated person of Indian origin. She was educated at SRCC, which is one of the most premier colleges in the country, and then she went on to become a professor in a UK university. The problem with Nitasha Kaul is that she questions a lot of fundamental aspects which India holds very dear. Aspects of Article of the revocation of Article 370 and the weaving of Kashmir into the Indian fabric. She questions this entire process. She questions our freedom credentials, our democratic credentials. She questions the minority status in India, that she thinks that the minorities are under tremendous pressure in India. So, on a lot of very sensitive parameters, she has a position which is completely opposite to the central government. And some of her ideas, some of whatever she has said about, actually converge more with the opposition parties in India. She's also a little notorious for having testified in front of the US Congress against India on the Kashmir issue. So there are a lot of issues which are related to Nitasha Kaul. And on top of that, which is the ironical part of the entire thing, she's a Kashmiri Hindu. Um, and yet I haven't seen any kind of real sympathy or empathy which she has for the Kashmiri Hindus. She questions this entire accession of Kashmir to India. So I could go on and on about Nitasha Kaul, but the more interesting thing is that what really happened when she landed at Bengaluru airport. She was detained there, as all of you must be knowing, for briefly for a few hours, and then she was sent back to the UK. And after landing back in the United Kingdom, she has been giving a spate of interviews. But there's one in particular interview which she has given. That interview is with Karan Thapar of The Wire, which caught my attention. And I actually kind of went over the interview again and again a couple of times. And then it completely struck me that I've seen this lady talking and giving her ideas in YouTube videos. You can also watch that, they're freely available on YouTube. But for the first time, I felt that she was terribly, terribly afraid. It was almost that she was very defensive. She was trying to almost give an impression that, no doubt, she was persecuted or whatever, that she was the impression she was giving. But she was also trying to give the impression that she was not anti India. And you could see very clearly that there was a little bit of panic which had set into her. Now, I'm going to answer this particular question why I think she's panicky at this point in time, but I'll answer that a little towards the end. First, I will give you a little bit of an overview of people like Nitasha Kaul, academic intellectuals as they are called. I'm going to talk a little bit about their ecosystem to acquaint you with the kind of world they come from, the world they live in, and then the role which people like these are suddenly playing in the geopolitical atmosphere, the contemporary geopolitical atmosphere. And then I will answer this particular question which I have posed in this particular episode, that why is Nitasha Kaul panicking? Okay, so let's get started with, let's try and understand what really is the ecosystem of people like Nitasha Kaul. Some of these people, I would in fact say a majority of these people, they left India in search of better opportunities. Partly because many of them could not make it in India. They were not particularly successes in India, and therefore they tried their hand and they wanted to go abroad. They went abroad. Some of their PhDs, they became academics, became professors, started teaching there. And over a period of years, a lot of them have become senior professors, and then many of them came back to India, and they had learned new ideas. They had thought that they had gained some kind of new wisdom in the West, and they wanted to share that wisdom of theirs when they came back to India. But lo and behold, when they came back to India, they suddenly found that this country had completely changed. It was no longer the country which they had left so many years back. Uh, India, as we all know, is a rising power today. It is a lot of them actually had left India when India was referred to as a third world country. Today, it is no longer referred to as a third world country. It is referred to as a rising power, a rising developing country, and already the government is setting sights on being a developed country by 2047. So they came back to a very different India. But worse for them, not only everything had changed, but there were no takers for their wisdom or for their ideas. And that was quite a shock for a lot of these academics and intellectuals. Some of them did try and get into some of the social media outlets and channels, but by and large, there were no takers for whatever they had to say or whatever their ideas were, because already in India, there is no dearth of people who are trying new things, who are accepting new things, who are actually even one step ahead of what the world is thinking and doing right now. The world had completely changed in India, and so this was quite a shock for these people. And my theory is that a lot of these people have harbored a certain kind of a resentment, a certain kind of an anger towards India. And it obviously, anger has to find expression somewhere. It has found expression in such people against the present government, against the policies of the government, against what this government is doing. And so that is a little bit of the background of where I would say a majority of these people come from. Of course, there are very eminent expats, academics, like Bhagwati, and there are a lot of other people who are in a different league altogether. But by and large, I'm saying a lot of these are left liberal, academic, intellectuals who have come back, who when they come back to India, they find a completely different India. There are no takers for their pearls of wisdom. And therefore, there's a lot of resentment in them. So we need to remember this background. Now, what is the ecosystem of these people? We have to also understand this. And what are they driven by? And before you would have asked me that why are they so against India? So have to give you 2 or 3 parameters of what really gets their goat vis-a-vis India, which they keep raving and ranting about on all television channels, media, wherever they get the opportunity. Starting number 1, that India is not really a true democracy according to them. It might be an electoral democracy, but they paint the picture it's like a fake electoral democracy because people really have no rights. They just have the right to vote. They elect a government, but otherwise they have no other rights. That's their standard argument which they keep making all the time. That's the first point. The second point is that we are heading into some kind of a dictatorship. One-man rule against the Prime Minister is initiated that in the country. This is the other line of thought which practically all of them have. The third thing which they really ruffles their feathers is about the Kashmir situation. Kashmir is now an integral part of India. 370 has been scrapped, as we all know, but they can't accept that. They want that 370 should be restored, status quo, ante, as they say, it should go back to that. But obviously, that is like a lot of water under the bridge now for us. We have moved on. Kashmir is an completely integral part of India. They don't accept that. And their other bugbear is what they feel are about minority rights. And minorities have no rights in India. They are subjugated by this government. So these are some of the pet bugbears of all these academic intellectuals, including that of Nitasha Kaul. Now, they come from an ecosystem where you would assume, since most of them are left liberal, that they are driven by ideology. Well, I have news for you. they are not so much driven by ideology as they are driven by self-preservation and self-aggrandizement. There's a word called self-aggrandizement, and the fact that they want to lead actually a very comfortable life. They want to have a very comfortable lifestyle. Now you'd ask that what does this have to do, comfortable lifestyle have to do with the intellectual predilections of such academic intellectuals? The fact is this, that in the West, a lot of professors, a lot of academics, they are given tenures. So these are not lifelong positions. These are tenures maybe for 3 years or something. There are senior people who assess them, who give them tenures on either on their PhD work or on the kind of work or on the kind of teaching which they are doing. And it's a fact that especially in the liberal arts, in the humanities, in history, anthropology, and these kind of subjects, the more anti-India you are, the more you are against the present government, the more the chances that you will be accepted, your tenures will become more secure, and the chances you will get a more kind of a, not permanent, but a kind of a quasi-permanent status in universities. So there is what I call the vested interest for a lot of these academic intellectuals to rail and rave and rant against India on all kinds of parameters, some of the parameters which I have discussed with you earlier. So this is the background. People think that they are driven by some kind of a hard left liberal ideology. Some of them might be, but a lot of them are driven purely by self-preservation, that they want their tenure to be extended. They want to work. They want to earn good money in these colleges. So that is one of the primary reasons. Number two, the entire community of people like Nitasha Kaul, and there are a lot of academics like her. We can in fact spend an entire episode of the number of these kind of academics which we have. But I won't bore you with that particular thing. But needless to say that this entire community they have formed a community of their own. They are like in a bubble with certain different characteristics which all of them share with each other. As I said, their antipathy or almost hatred, I would say, towards India is of course the common binding factor. They question the democratic credentials of the present government in India. This binds them together. But also what really binds them is the sense of entitlement. And the entitlement comes from the fact that, oh, we have studied in the West, we are teaching in the West, so therefore we know more than people back home in India. And as I explained to you earlier, when they come back to India and when they tour the tours and schools and colleges in India, or when they interact with within quotes, the intellectual class in India, they find there are no takers for their pearls of wisdom. Nobody wants to actually listen to them. And this is something which is of a deep shock to them. There's a lot of anger out there. So this sense of entitlement is there. Then, by and large, as I said, they are living in a cocoon. They're living in a kind of a bubble. And all of them are, they all have this morality edge to them. They are constantly preaching and screeching and preaching. Western values all the time to India, where we are now on a path or a discovering our own civilizational values, which are the new guiding lights for as we move ahead, both in a civilizational sense, but also in an economic sense. But they have a certain kind of a Western mindset which they want to impose, but there are no takers for that. So this shrill preacherness is a part and parcel of their ecosystem, which all of them binds all of them together. But now I come to the crux of the matter, the real reason why these people behave as they behave. And the real reason is that to be a left liberal, to rail and rave and rant against India is profitable because it gives you the opportunity to travel all over the world, to go to different places, to, in luxury and lifestyle, you travel business class, you stay in the best hotels, you are attending seminars all the time. In fact, I would even go to the extent of saying, if you see the track record of a lot of these academics, they spend very little time in actually teaching back home, back home, that is in the UK, Canada, or US, wherever they are, where they have their tenures. They are traveling most of the time, and this travel, this facilitation of this travel is all facilitated by these almost international group, and that is what binds all these left liberals together. They support each other, they fund each other, and then there are grants from a lot of vested interests, and that money is used to, and it's a great lifestyle. It's a very comfortable lifestyle. And the joke being that, for instance, in India, we know that some of the poorer teachers and professors in some of our colleges, they don't attend that because they take tuition. So these are the Western upgraded version of that. These people hardly teach in their own universities, but they're constantly traveling, holding seminars, throwing their pearls of wisdom, as it is said, and preaching shrilly morality, democracy, freedom, all the other values, what has happened to India, why is India going down on all parameters. And therefore, this ecosystem flourishes when all of them are binded together. And of course, there is no lack of funds for such people. There are a lot of vested interests. There are a lot of there are a lot of these institutions which are funded actually even by the government in some Western societies, which fund these endeavors. So this entire ecosystem, if it flourishes on the fact that the bedrock has to be something which is anti-Indian, where you rail and rave and rant, as I keep saying, against India. So that is the ecosystem these people come from. And just to very quickly also kind of reiterate, what are the salient features of the points of people like Nitasha Kaul? I'll just give you a list of them. There is number one, democracy, or the lack of democracy, as they keep saying in India. Number two, they talk about gender also, that there is women are discriminated against in India. The condition of the women in rural areas is pathetic, according to them. They keep talking of the degradation of the environment in India. Why can't India come up to more Western standards of environmental acceptance? Then caste is the new thing which has entered the equation, and they keep not talking of caste. They keep talking of Dalit rights, as if I don't know what they have to do with Dalit rights or whatever, but they have now. It's like I have this hegemony, and I can talk about Dalit rights because we understand that, as if people in India don't understand. So they keep talking of caste. They keep talking of minorities. Minority in translation doesn't really mean Christians or Sikhs so much, but as the Muslims, that the Indian state discriminates against the Muslim. That's again a pet bugbear for them. Freedom, as I have said. And then this last particular topic, or the last word which they keep now constantly using in all their sermons, is the word called genocide. So if you look very carefully, a lot of their terminology, a lot of what they are saying actually is what is called pre-Second World War and a little bit post-Second World War rhetoric, language, and terminology. See, words like fascism, words like genocide, all these words actually are words which gained currency during the Second World War. Fascism was as I said, a very particular kind of a phenomena which was raging in Europe during the Second World War. And if you start loosely applying fascism to countries like India, it does complete injustice because there is no relevance of fascism or whatever to India. We have different issues in India, different problems also, I would say, but certainly not fascism. Then the word genocide. Genocide, as we all understand, is mass scale annihilation of people, of communities, of a group. That is genocide. But what happens in India, supposing if there is, let's say, the lynching, for instance, of, let's say, an innocent cow smuggler who might be a Muslim, and if such an incident happens, the next day all these people will gang up and say that genocide is taking place in India. So a single murder, a single incident translates for them as genocide, which is, to my mind, actually an abuse of the word genocide. But these are the pet bugbears of all these people. They deploy these tools, as it were, the toolkit. This is part of their toolkit. They deploy these tools to put democratic governments like the government, rising powers like India under pressure. Now, all this, when it exists, as I said, in a bubble, or it exists in the netherworld of academia, or it actually exists in a certain intellectual unreal world which is not so much connected to what happens on ground zero, it is still okay, acceptable. As we say in Hindi, chalta hai, it's fine. But the problem occurs on both sides when whatever the papers these people write, whatever they speak on YouTube videos, or the so-called intellectual papers which they produce, are picked up by very strong vested interests and then used to browbeat countries like India. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And that also actually partly also explain the functioning of these people. Why are these people allowed to function in this manner also? See, in international diplomacy, in geopolitics, foreign governments, especially erstwhile Western governments, which have been very powerful, but now they find that power is actually slipping out of their hands, or rather, there has been a transfer of power taking place from the West to the East, especially in rising powers like India, which are becoming more powerful by the day. They need something to kind of checkmate, they need something to act as a kind of a barrier to the rising ambitions of countries like India. Now, what could that be? Since you cannot compete with them on economic terms, on technological terms, on infrastructure, and so many other things which are going on. So what's the best thing you start? You start creating problems or barricades for them on the intellectual front. And that is where then all these academics coming, because all the papers they have produced, all the voices of dissent which keep coming from their end, these are then picked up, catalogued, and presented to in what are called human rights reports, which these Western governments then fling in the faces of countries like India. And that is where the problem develops. Then suddenly, as I said, the nether world, where, the unreal world where you're talking of genocide, fascism, and all that, which frankly 10 people in maybe in a room are listening and nobody else could be bothered. But suddenly, if that is picked up, let's say, by the State Department of the United States, and then it is catalogued into a report, or human rights reports, and then that is then shoved in the faces of powerful people or the people that matter in India, that this is what you do with democracy, this is how you treat your minorities, then the problems really start occurring. Then they start because that is the leverage which Western countries then use to browbeat India. And this is where the role of these academics coming, that they provide the fodder, they provide the ground base for Western governments to pick up these kind of reports, these words, which are used, obviously, as I said, in a very loose manner to browbeat India. And it's not only them, it's not only the Western governments. The intelligence agencies, the spy agencies of Western governments are also on the lookout. Some actually of these academics are actually also are on the payrolls of these intelligence agencies, because their words are produced. They are then they are given hospitality, they are ferried, they are put up in the best places, these academics, by these intelligence agencies to speak against India in the corridors of power in the West. And that's the game which is right now in full swing in the West. Because as we look at geopolitics closely today in the world, we find that the West is under tremendous pressure. They have things are not certainly going well for them in the Russia-Ukraine war. By all accounts, a lot of people think that Ukraine is about to, or if not, already has lost the war, which is a huge setback for the Western world. Um, Things with China are also not particularly happy right now. There are some kind of tensions with India also. So, in that context, both the governments, both the bureaucracies in these countries, especially the intelligence outfits in these countries, then use the work of these disaffected academics, intellectuals, especially of those of Indian origin, and and they fling it back to India. And it also helps. It also helps that you're not particularly a white person, but you are a brown person. You are a person of Indian origin who probably has migrated to India a long time back, or who still has family roots or connection in India. If that kind of a person is making these noises, all the more better for these Western interlocutors to use the material provided by these academic intellectuals to fling it back to India and put India under pressure for negotiating newer deals, newer positions. That's the game which is being played. So this is the game, this is the context in which Nitasha Kaul and people of her ilk are constantly operating. Now, I'll come back to the original question which I had posed for you, that why is Nitasha Kaul panicking? And I'll give you a context to that. See, if you watch this interview very carefully with Karan Thapar, and Karan Thapar is, of course, a person who is exactly of the same mindset as Nitasha Kaul. We all know that. In fact, this entire interview, if you watch very carefully, is actually humorous at one level, because you can see that Karan Thapar has prepped up Nitasha Kaul how best to answer and what kind of questions he'll be asking. It's like, they've already rehearsed and then this happened. But in the process of the entire thing, in the interview, two or three things came out that Nitasha Kaul was extremely uncomfortable with all the publicity she has got. And I'll tell you why. Nitasha Kaul is not some harebrained person or some brainless person, somebody who is literally on somebody's reading from somebody's playbook. She's a fairly intelligent person. Though, as I said, there's a deviousness in her arguments, which of course we don't like. That's a different part, but give it to her, she's a very intelligent person. And I think what has happened is that she has figured out a real danger for her in the position, or rather, the focus which has come on her, or the entire limelight in which she suddenly finds herself. And what is that danger? Remember the Niger case? The Niger was not a Nitasha Kaul. Niger was a very crude kind of a person, but still, to some extent, he was carrying on. He was working for some intelligent outfit in the Canadian government. We all know that. And then he was bumped off, and the Canadians have been accusing us that we kind of bumped him off. Nitasha Kaul understands, and this is something which is my own reasoning, and I certainly don't want anything to happen to the lady, but she understands that there is a threat perception against her, because tomorrow in the United Kingdom, supposing if some ISI agent, and there are a lot of these ISI agents in the United Kingdom, they have all seen the blaze of publicity and everything which has happened to Nitasha Kaul, and supposing some of them causes some kind of harm to her, and then the narrative builds up that Indian agents did something to Nitasha Kaul, and she understands that, and that is why Nitasha Kaul is panicking. And that is the reason why she is backtracking. You can see it so very clearly in this interview with Karan Thapar, where from the strident positions she has always held, she is somewhat retreating back. She's trying to say, she's actually giving this argument in that interview that I have criticized Pakistan, I have criticized the jihadi forces out there. She's saying that in this interview, which she has never done before, by the way, which is a lie. But she is backtracking because suddenly she realizes that she could become Niger 2.0 if she's not careful, because there are all kinds of hostile, very dangerous elements floating around in the Western world who can be up to no good, who can actually cause even bodily harm to you. So that is the context which I'm talking about. Intellectuals, as far as, as you say, words are words at the end of the day, but if words carry a certain meaning, and if words are used to not only project policy, but are used to throttle, the other side. They are used to damage people, and if the stakes are very high, anything goes. And that's why people have to be very careful. And this is what I think she has understood in that particular interview. And that's why you can see so very clearly in that interview that she is backtracking. And why do I say about the UK? Because if you see reports which are coming from the UK, the Prime Minister there, Sunak, he's actually asked his own police that and you're not going to believe this, but they've actually created a fund of some 33 million pounds or something to protect their own members of parliament from the mobs who are now running rampant all over the United Kingdom. And who are these mobs? These are the same protesters who were protesting against Israel when this entire war was going on. And now all this protest has converted into mob fury, which is now targeted against a member of parliament in the UK parliament. And Sunak has sounded his own police of this threat and says, guys, can you do something about this, because this has become a threat. So if in a country like that can happen, and we all know who are behind these mobs. There are a lot of these sleeper agents, sleeper cells from hostile countries, from countries even like Pakistan. The ISI is very active, I think, out there. And I think Nitasha Kaul is a very smart, a very bright person. She understands the danger that lies for people like her, people who have opened their mouths too much to take stridently one position, because these kind of forces, they are not going to sympathize with you. They're going to use you. They're going to do something to you to create a counter narrative and try and put and blacken India's name in the world. She understands that. And that's why she's backtracking. And so this is how these games are constantly being played in the geopolitical situation of today. We live in very interesting, but very certainly very hostile, very dangerous times, where nothing is off the table, nothing is kosher. At the end of the day, people will go to any lengths to achieve what they have in mind. All the old rules, all the old niceties, all that has broken down completely. And if the intellectual class, and Nitasha is representative of that so-called intellectual class, if this class thought that they could get away with saying and doing anything without any repercussions, or without pushback, or without something else happening, then they are in, they're living in la la land, as I would say. There are forces out there which are waiting for opportunities like this to spring in, to come in and do something, create an incident, create a narrative whereby their objectives are realized. And so this answers the question why Nitasha Kaul is panicking. And just hope that some sense draws on these intellectuals, on these academics who go the extra mile to keep criticizing the country of their origin, the country of their birth. So much good, so much interesting things are happening in our own country. We really need no homilies from people like us, but at the same time, it's interesting to understand these events, to see that how hostile forces move in very quickly to take advantage of the stupidities of people, especially the so-called intelligent, intellectual academic class. And so on this note, I come to the end of this episode of the CAA show, and I hope you really enjoyed this particular episode. You like this show, do subscribe to us. There's that red button on your screen. Press that button. You become a subscriber. You don't have to pay us anything. It's completely free of charge. And one thing I can promise you, in these my episodes, you'll always get a totally different perspective from whatever you see on social media. I think I give you a totally different perspective. So keep, as you say, logging in, keep watching, keep sharing this video, talk about this video to your friends. We must build our own narrative. We must build our own community, as you say, of people who debate all sides. And I'm certainly not predisposed to any one side. I love to debate on both sides. So we will keep doing that in this particular show. Keep watching the CAA show. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.